hard for me. I have finished a new malware that nobody has built and nobody has shared. And my goal is next week, while sending the call for papers for DEFCON. And if they accept me, well, this year a new malware is going to appear. Some exploitation techniques that have never been shared or documented before, they are going to appear again, and some exploits for non-CVEs, and how to debug some low-level components to find vulnerabilities there. It's going to be crazy if they accept the call for papers. So yeah, well, if you are interested in this kind of work, which is more related to what I presented at DEFCON, not really this talk, feel free to follow me. Okay, I will be sharing things as they come out. But yeah, new malware is going to be shared for the first time in 2026. That's for fucking sure. And now that I have introduced myself, let's get started. Okay, we have a really interesting journey ahead of us. Um, this talk is framed around three main ideas. Okay, the first idea is that the path that leads to a CV should start from passion, not obsession. Okay, if your only thought is I need a CV as fast as possible, that usually leads to frustration. Okay, what really works is building on something you genuinely enjoy. The second idea is that there is no single correct path. Okay, there are many different paths that can lead to a first CV, and the best thing you can do when you start is understand them and figure out which one actually fits you. And then the third idea, the third thing is that the reporting process is not as intimidating as it might seem at first. Okay, but what I really want you to understand by the end is that in your career, you don't need to find dozens of vulnerabilities in WordPress plugins that nobody uses. Okay, you need to find one vulnerability, one good vulnerability at the right moment that helps prevent a future attack. Okay, if you share the reporting experience, if you share the proof of concept, the write-up, whatever helps others understand the vulnerability, and that ends up helping someone or helping a company avoid being attacked, that's when you have really contributed to the community. So don't focus on trying to discover hundreds of bugs, maybe useless bugs. Focus on what you're passionate about. Put time into it, go deeper, and sooner or later, you will naturally run into vulnerabilities in that field. I can almost guarantee you that. So, three things: passion, paths, and reporting. So, let's go with chapter one, the question that pretty much everyone asks at some point. Um, this talk uh, could easily have been titled in many different ways. Instead of the path that leads to your first CV, it could have had many of the titles you see here on the slide. If you look closely, while some of the titles are very clearly focused on getting a CV, on the idea of obtaining it, okay, and others are much more about um, uh, the journey, the learning process, and the long road behind vulnerability research. And then there are a few that sit somewhere in the middle, mixing both ideas. Well, I can tell you that a bad title for this talk will be How to Get Your First CB. And I say it's a bad title, it's a bad question too, but at the same time, it's actually a pretty good question to start with. Why? Because if you take that exact question and you Google it, what you will find is not a single answer. You will find blogs, videos, write-ups, and shared experiences from many different researchers. Okay, you will find different paths, different tools, very different journeys. So even if it's a bad title for a talk like this one, it's a perfectly valid question to ask at the beginning of your journey. But but the important part is how you use that question. Okay, I believe that one of the first things that you should do when you want to specialize in finding vulnerabilities in a specific area is to read how other people have done it, right? Or even better, take notes about it. Not to copy them, not to replicate their steps blindly, but to understand their experience. Because by doing that, you start seeing, well, different ways people test software. So asking, how do I get my first CVE is fine as long as you are asking it for the right reason. The real value on doing that, on performing that search, is in learning from other people's experiences and then using that knowledge to shape and create your own project, your own path. Okay, and that distinction is very, very important because if you don't approach that question in the right way, you're going to run into a problem, and it's a really big one. Okay, if you ask that question just to find a checklist to follow, a receipt, you're very likely to end up frustrated. Not only frustrated about getting a CVE, but frustrated with vulnerability research as a whole. And I know this because the example you see on the screen, that's exactly what I did for a short period of time when I was starting, well, many years ago. I followed a path that was not really mine, just because it looked like the easy way to getting results, and it didn't take me so long to you know to realize that something was wrong. The thing is that when you follow someone else's recipe, um, you are working on areas that might not interest you at all, forcing yourself through a process that doesn't align with what you are truly passionate about. And if you are not careful, you start disliking vulnerability research itself. That's why the way you ask that initial question matters so much. Okay, this is the core problem with receipts. You can follow a receipt perfectly, do everything step by step, even get results, and still feel bad doing it because you are not enjoying the process. And that's the whole point. If you are not enjoying what you're doing, something is so fucking wrong. So we're going to reframe the question. Okay, you can ask that basic question at the beginning. It's okay, how do I get my first CVE? It's normal to do it. But at some point, usually after a few hits against the wall, you realize that that was not really the right question to ask. Okay, the real question is the one you see on the screen. Okay, um how do I build a career where I can spend my days working on something I genuinely enjoy? Because the truth is that no matter which area of cybersecurity you end up in, sooner or later you will run into vulnerabilities. One way or another, you will face them. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the important thing is to have in mind is that it doesn't really matter if someone finds 50 vulnerabilities in WordPress plugins that nobody uses. What matters is finding one good vulnerability, just one that truly has impact. Okay, that's the CVE that counts, the one other people can learn from. So if there is one thing I want you to keep in mind at this point, it's assume first, do it because you love it, ask the question the right way, and learn from other people's experiences. Okay. Now let's assume we have done the exercise. Okay, we have gone online, we have read blogs, watched talks, and collected different experiences from professionals who have already reported vulnerabilities and obtained CVs. So once you do that exercise properly and start organizing those experiences, some common paths start to appear again and again. And at least these paths show up very frequently. So I want to take a closer look at them with you. Okay, I called the first one the WordPress web plugin path. Okay, um, well, when you think about how an attacker usually gets their first foothold into a system, one of the first things that should come to your mind is the exposure of vulnerable web service, right? Because web application security is a huge field. It's also the field that many people start with, and the thing is that some beginners have gotten their first CVE by analyzing WordPress plugins, since it represents an accessible entry point into web vulnerability research. So, choosing this path, if it's something you generally enjoy, finding vulnerabilities in web applications, has many benefits, mainly because there are already a very solid public resources available. You have the OWASP Top 10, the OWASP Web Security Testing Guide. You find tons of blogs and write-ups from people who followed exactly this route to get their first CV. And on top of that, you have free labs like the Portugal Academy labs. So which allow you to practice. So it's quite easy to build your own environment, install a few plugins, and start applying the techniques you are learning. Okay, and all of that is what makes it one of the most beginner-friendly antipaths out there. So you should definitely try it if that's something you generally enjoy. Finding vulnerabilities in web applications. Now, the next one I want to talk about is not really for beginners, but I still wanted to introduce it here because some of you might already be in this situation. Okay, maybe you have done some courses, you have completed a degree or earned a couple of certifications, and eventually a company gives you the chance to work in cybersecurity, right? So you start doing vulnerability research, you become a penetration tester in 1 2 years, and then you test applications every day and you are finding vulnerabilities, but those vulnerabilities belong to a client engagement. So even though you are clearly discovering real security issues, you are not getting CVs. Now, if at some point you think, okay, so I would like to try to get a CV, well, what you can do is shift slightly into a nearby area, okay, and explore that on your free time. I'm going to give you a concrete example from my own experience. Um, at one point, I discovered a critical vulnerability in a mobile application where it was possible to use another user's account to pay for a transportation service. Basically, you were spending someone else's money. And it was a pretty good vulnerability, and I wanted the world to know about it. But it was found in a client engagement context, so I couldn't publish anything. But at that moment, I realized, I'm clearly capable of finding good vulnerabilities. So I decided to pick a web application that I was using almost every day, and simply look at how it had been built, having fun with it in my free time, and see if I could spot a flaw there. And I ended up finding a vulnerability. The thing is, when you spend enough time trying to understand how something is built, you usually end up discovering that there are things that maybe were not well designed, or things that could clearly be improved. Okay, and what I want to share with this example is that some of you might be in a very similar situation. Maybe you are finding vulnerabilities as part of your daily work, but you're not getting CVs, and that's fucking fine. It really doesn't matter. Okay, you just have to see it this way. You are sharpening your skills. Okay? You are building the knowledge and the experience so that when the right moment comes, you will be ready to find a vulnerability that truly matters. Okay, um, I have seen a lot of people these years that they are in this or they were in this exact situation. So I wanted to introduce this path just for you to know that there are so many people out there that they are finding vulnerabilities almost every day, but they are not getting serious, and it's fucking fine. Okay, it's fine. Now I want to go back to another beginner-friendly path. Okay, this is also one you will see mentioned a lot when you read other researcher experiences online, and it's the path of code analysis. GitHub is full of projects that you can audit easily, and many researchers have taken advantage of that. What they do is look for specific patterns in code that are commonly associated with vulnerabilities, and then they search across GitHub repositories for those patterns, and they start reviewing the code more carefully, manually. So basically, this is the beginner-friendly path for source code analysis in the same way the WordPress path is for web application testing. And continuing with something I emphasized earlier, I want to introduce you this one. The core idea here is the same I mentioned a few slides ago. When you spend enough time researching the same thing or really learning how it works, you almost, well, always end up finding something. Okay, this path can still be followed by a beginner, but it takes much more time than the others. And this is actually the path I followed when I when I got my first CB. In my case, it happened during my final degree project, but I don't want you to think of this as an academic thing or a final project path. This is about picking something specific, a device, a protocol, a piece of software, whatever, and spending a lot of time understanding it deeply. You're going to find a flaw, or you're going to report a new exploitation technique that has not been reported before. You're going to find something. You spend so much time researching the same thing day after day after day after fucking day. And finally, the last path. I don't really want you to associate this path strictly with legacy software, but I have labeled it in that way for you to have the beginner friendly entry point into desktop application vulnerabilities. Okay, that's what this path is about. And as I said at the beginning, this is the path I will be giving you resources for in case you want to follow it. Okay, because it's close to reverse engineering, which is what I generally enjoy. And yeah, it's well, as I said, it's also the path that I teach in one of the master's degree programs where I'm a professor. So if you like sitting in front of a disassembler, the compiler, you like reading pseudocode, understanding how things work internally, and yeah, and reverse engineering, well, desktop applications, drivers, or other low-level components, you need to understand that this path is absolutely viable for you, even if you are a beginner. So first, I'm going to um, talk about some examples from other researchers who followed a very similar idea to the one I want to demonstrate. If you look at the names on the slide, well, I guess you will probably recognize them. These are all versions of software that are, well, they are commonly used to teach classic exploitation techniques like stack and heap buffer overflows. Most people interact with these binaries purely from an exploitation perspective, right? They reproduce the non-vulnerability, they get code execution, and then move on. But that's not what the researchers behind these CVEs did. Instead of just exploiting the already known vulnerabilities in these programs, they took a different approach. So they looked at the same vulnerable software and asked, well, is there something else here? And they ended up finding different issues. Still rooted, okay, still root in similar underlying vulnerabilities, but affecting other commands. And I show these students to my, I show these examples to my students because they prove that if you understand something as basic as a buffer overflow, it's not just about exploiting it. You can also look at the same program from a different angle, find something new, well, new between quotes, and turn that into your first vulnerability report. And well, the Meetup programs nowadays allow you to get new CVEs, okay, even in old or legacy software. And well, when I can tell you that when I first saw these examples, I actually logged because I found them at the exact moment when I was thinking about doing mm, something very similar for my students. The goal was to show them that if they enjoy reverse engineering, they shouldn't ignore it just because modern targets seem too complex. Okay, you don't need to start analyzing, the most modern browser or some kernel module. You can build your skills on simpler software and still do something real. So the first thing that I did was create a very similar and simple example for them. A basic memory corruption bug, I mean, a piece of software where nothing had been reported before, and I got a CVE for them to show them, hey, you can do the same, okay? And it only leads to a denial of service. Okay, nothing fancy, but that's the whole point. That's exactly the point. You can take something simple, find an issue, and turn it into a report because nowadays the meter programs allow you to do that. And then I created a couple of additional repositories. One focused on, well, understanding memory corruption and exploitation, and another one that sets up a full exploit development environment automatically. So my students, and now you, if you want, you can use it and focus on debugging and analyzing instead of setup. And well, I have to apologize with you because these 5 days when you are building when you are building a marvel that nobody has built before and you want to share with people and you have to reverse engineer the entire boot process, the kernel. It's so hard, but I want to send the call for papers for DEFCON next week, so I hadn't time to finish another resource that I wanted to give you. It's a heap buffer overflow in Windows 11. So if you give me 2 or 3 weeks, I can just post it in some of the channels in the Discord. Okay, but just for you to know that if you like to um, exploit binaries, I'm going to publish. It's not a new exploit, but there is only one guy that has shared the same exploit, and I have improved it. But I have to document it much better for you to build the same lab and everything. But well, I'm going to give you more resources just for you to know. Okay, so up to this point, you have seen different paths that a beginner can follow across different areas, and you already have resources to start exploring one of them, the reverse engineering path. Now, now that you have this kind of overview, um, what I want to do next is tell you a story. Okay, a story meant to show you that the path you follow is uniquely yours, and that you never really know how or from where you will end up discovering your first vulnerability or the first one that truly matters. Earlier this month, I was at RootedCon in Madrid. RootedCon is a conference, one of the most important conferences here in cybersecurity conference here in Spain. And I gave a talk about APT emulation and how to bypass the CrowdStrike IDR and execute some ransomware and whatever. And during that conference, a former student of mine also gave a talk. And he has been working as a malware analyst for, um, I guess, like 5 or 6 years now. And in his free time, he started building his own operating system for malware analysis called the Pandora Box. You can Google it, okay, if you want. Pandora Box. And well, while working on that project, well, he wasn't looking for vulnerabilities. He was just trying to build, well, something useful for his daily work. But as he was analyzing how different applications behaved, he noticed something. Many of those applications were built on top of the same framework. So he started digging into it, okay, just out of curiosity. And what he found was that once an application is built using that framework, its behavior can be modified at runtime. So you can inject logic into the execution context because the framework doesn't enforce strong security boundaries. Okay, it assumes developers will implement their own protections, but many of them don't. So what he ended up finding was not just a bug in one application, but a design flaw in a framework itself. So something that affected many applications built on top of it. In fact, the first slide that he showed was because this kind of flaw affected Visual Studio Code. And the first slide was showing how Microsoft, uh, um, because he tried to report the flaw to Microsoft, and they said, well, this is a feature. It's like, man, pick your I can pick Visual Studio Code and the old version of Microsoft Teams and inject logic into it and build my own command and control. But it's the process, it's Microsoft Teams or it's Visual Studio Code, the process that is doing the connections and doing the malicious operations. It was so cool. The talk so was it was amazing to be honest. And that's how just following his path, malware analysis, reverse engineering, creating a fucking operating system, he ended up discovering well a real vulnerability, a flaw that, well, it was so awesome. And what I want you to understand now is that, well, behind every path and behind every CVE that actually matters, there's a lot of time and a lot of specialization. So if you want to follow a path, focus on, for example, finding vulnerabilities in desktop applications, something that I really like, well, you will probably need to spend a lot of time um, learning how to spot vulnerabilities or more vulnerable patterns in source code, and how to diff patches, and how to use professional fuzzing tools, and how to do proper reverse engineering of binaries or UEFI applications or kernel drivers or kernel models. And that takes time, a lot of time. And that's the point. If you're going to invest that amount of time and effort to have the skills to report a good vulnerability, a good finding, it has to be in something you genuinely enjoy. In my case, it's reverse engineering, but whatever area you choose to specialize in, you have to make sure it's something you like. So think about the paths and select one. You are a beginner, but just take into take into your mind that there are many different paths, not just one. And you don't have to specialize in something that you don't really like. Okay? So at this point, I don't think I need to say this again, but just in case, find the area of cybersecurity you're passionate about. Sooner or later, you will find a real good vulnerability there. Share the details with the community to contribute and help prevent future attacks. That's what you have to do. And besides that basic CVE I showed you earlier, which I reported to demonstrate to my students that they could follow the path of reverse engineering even as a beginners, these are the two examples I wanted to share with you. Okay, if you scan those two QR codes, you will find all the material related to those vulnerabilities. Okay, the full disclosure process, the email size changed with the vendor, um, the exploit videos, the exploit and the videos are exploiting the vulnerability, and and even presentations that I did. I prepared some presentations to help them understand how to fix the issue. So basically everything that was part of reporting and handling those vulnerabilities is there. Okay. Um, the first one was well discovered while I was doing research as part of my final degree project. As part of my final degree project, sorry, like I mentioned earlier, and it affected IoT devices that implement the CVE protocol. And those devices lacked from proper protection against replay attacks. And this one was never fixed. Um, like some CV stories out there, um, well, when you discover something without a strong background or reputation behind you, well, you're not always taken seriously, so the remediation process end up going nowhere. You can read it yourself in the repository. And the second vulnerability was an access control issue in the central management console of an anti-ransomware solution, and it allowed an authenticated user, well, me or well, whatever, from an authenticated user from one organization to disable agents and get information belonging to other organizations. And this was fairly a critical issue, especially considering that this product, this anti-ransomware solution, is used and well, is and was used by government bodies and several public entities here in my country. So it was good to report it. So yeah, feel free to explore all the material and use it as an inspiration for your own path. Okay. Now, well, we're going to enter into the final phase. Okay, so we're going to put ourselves into this situation. We have follow a path. Okay, we have focused on a specific technology, product, or application. Okay, we have spent time understanding how it works, and at some point we detect a flaw, we detect a vulnerability. So what's the next step? Well, the first thing we need to do is make sure we can reproduce it reliably. Okay, we need to clearly understand the condition that triggers the vulnerability. Then we have to identify which products and which versions are affected. We build the proof of concept to exploit the flaw, and after that we evaluate the impact. Okay, and well, while we are doing all of this, we should document everything. Okay, all in a way that another person can follow and reproduce the steps. And once we have all that documentation in place, that's when we are ready to move to the next step. That is contacting the vendor and starting the reporting process. And for that, you can use a template like the one you see on the slide. At this point, you already have everything documented, so the message itself is straightforward. Okay, you reach out the vendor, you explain to them that well you want to perform a responsible disclosure for a vulnerability you have found in their product. You specify the affected versions, you briefly describe the type of vulnerability and outline the potential impact. And from there, it turns into a back and forth conversation. You exchange information, answer questions, you share additional details, and work with them um, while they fix the issue. And well, yes, vendor vendor communication can sometimes turn into a nightmare. Uh, there are plenty of horror stories about that. But if you approach it with the right mindset, making it clear that you are there to help them fix the issue and protect their users, things usually go well. Okay, the world is full of full of assholes sometimes, so I cannot guarantee you that things are going to go well, but you can try it. Okay, and once you have communicated with the vendor and the issue is understood, the next step is, well, simply requesting the CV. Mitre provides a form for this, so you go to that URL and you have to select report vulnerability request CVE ID. You fill in the required the required fields that, well, basically you reuse what you already have documented: a clear description of the vulnerability, the affected products and versions, the type of vulnerability, the impact, and any relevant details. Okay, you submit the form and then you wait. Requesting the CV itself is the easiest part of the whole process. At that point, it's just taking the documentation you have already done and putting it into a Mitre form. Okay, and you have to wait and wait and wait a bit more. But at some point, you finally receive that email saying that a CV identifier has been assigned to the vulnerability you reported. But many blogs, well, what many blogs don't talk about or only mention briefly is this next step. Okay, there is one more step after requesting the CV. At this point, you have a pre-assigned CB. Okay, they answer to your email and they say, okay, so your vulnerability has been assigned the CB 2026 wherever. Okay, so you have a pre-assigned CB ID, but it's still not public. So you have to go back to the same Mitre form, but this time you select notify CB about the publication, and there you provide public references that show the vulnerability. For example, a vendor advisory or your GitHub repository where you have published all the material. Okay, Um, just that. You submit the form, you wait again. The second wait is much shorter, and when Meter confirms it, the CVE, well, becomes public, and that's it. You have got your CV. So, well, as I said, all the material related to these two CVEs is available in those repositories. Feel free to use it as inspiration or to learn from my own experience. The emails that I have exchanged, the exploit, the videos, presentations, everything is there for you to learn from it. Okay, and I guess that with that we are done. But before we close, okay, before we close, I want to say something. Um, if you just take one thing from this talk, let it be this. Okay, in your career, focus on finding and reporting a vulnerability that is actually worth it. Okay, you just have to find one, because you don't want to be the guy, because just a couple of months ago, and I can send you the LinkedIn post if you give me some minutes. I read a post in LinkedIn that, well, someone that I know created, and he said, well, he wrote a post saying, "Hey, the entire world, at the time, maybe 2 years ago, I found 50 vulnerabilities in WordPress plugins that nobody used it." I think he said that. I think he said, and then he said, "I'm not proud of that." And I was like, "Man, what the fuck are you saying?" It's like, okay, so this guy, you don't want to be that fucking loser. Okay, you can find, okay, it's okay if you find 50 vulnerabilities, okay? And those vulnerabilities have no impact, okay? But you cannot say, I'm not fucking proud of what I did. He developed a tool to automate the findings in some plugins WordPress. So he had a tool that he could share, and he could create um, a presentation, and he could give a talk about the CVEs. And um, man, there are some platforms out there that they don't audit the code that some amateur developers upload, so they are putting users at risk. So I'm giving this talk to show that those WordPress plugins are not secure. The users are at risk, and I'm sharing this tool that I have created to automate the findings. I'm so proud of that, and that was 2 years ago. Do you see the, the, the fucking difference? Okay, it doesn't matter if your first CV is one CV that you know that has no impact, or you're fucking learning. You're fucking learning. But man, share what you have done. You have to be so proud of your work. You don't want to be that guy. You want to be the guy that I have said, the guy that go and give a talk and share the tool and say, hey, the users are at risk. And you want to give that guy, not the one that goes to fucking LinkedIn and create a post about, oh, I'm not proud of getting CVs. I'm a fucking loser. Oh yeah, I know. Come on, you understand, right? So just find your path. Enjoy the fucking process. I'm enjoying almost every day. Well, these 5 days were fucking nightmare because the malware is wow. Malware is my brain is is burning right now. But I'm enjoying almost every day of my life, and I'm not getting CVs now. I'm just creating exploits for known CVs, and I'm just documented exploitation techniques that no one has documented. And I'm enjoying my time. I'm enjoying every day, and I'm gonna share everything. Yeah, and I can create a post saying I'm gonna publish everything. I'm gonna give a talk if they have sent my colorful papers. I'm gonna share something that no one has shared, and I'm enjoying every day of my fucking life. Okay, you want to be the guy that is proud of his work, and you are going to be proud of your work if you are enjoying what you are doing. Okay, if you do something, or follow a path just to get CVs, you're gonna be a fucking loser. Not going to you're not going to enjoy the time. Even you're getting a CV, you're gonna say to yourself, oh, this is not what I'm what I wanted to find. No, man, enjoy cybersecurity, please. um okay, so just with that, I'm going to finish. Okay, it has been a pleasure. I don't know if you have enjoyed it. Like I said at the beginning, this is a talk for beginners. It's not really for you. You're not beginners, but I think that when you're just starting into vulnerability research, you need a talk like this one to focus on what you really want to do with your life. Yeah, with the area you want to specialize in. So as I said, it has been a pleasure. Maybe next time I can fly and be with you in physically. But well, it has been a pleasure to give the talk remotely as well. Okay, thank you so much, guys. Hello, C, you there? I don't hear you well.
Hey, yeah, we don't have the room mic, just the front here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you.
I think I can say on behalf of everybody that it was really informative. You gave it a good walkthrough and registering and for publishing and everything. It was a really good talk. Let's give it one more time. Really appreciate you staying up late for us tonight, and look forward to maybe seeing you at DEF CON sometime.
Yeah, let's see if they accept the call for bibbers. I'm gonna send it next week. I still have to record some demos, but yeah, it's gonna be awesome. I'm gonna share it this year because I have finished it. So well, if they don't accept it, I guess I will have to find another conference. But well, whatever. I'm gonna share the malware and the exploitation techniques this year for sure. But yeah,
Uh,
I would like to be there at DEFCON and see you all there.
well, on that, we're going to take like a 5-10 minute break, and then we're going to come back with Hacker Jeopardy.
Guys, enjoy so much the capture the flag. I'm going to fucking sleep because here in Spain it's 3 a.m. in the morning and I need to rest. Okay. I love you all and have fun. Okay, have fun.
Yes, thank
Thanks
you
a
so
bunch.
much.
Yeah, thanks, man. Night night.
Bye guys. Bye bye.